Welcome to my channel, where you come for the funny accent, but hopefully stay for the analysis. Today we're going to talk about the impact the war in Iran and the closing of the Strait of Hormuz will have on the energy transition. If it will speed it up, or if it will just be a small bump on the road. But before we do that, let's provide a little bit of context. Economists would call it an inelastic product. That means we're not so price sensitive because oil is difficult to replace. You still need to fuel up your car in order to take the children to school or go and buy your groceries. And it's not like, fuel cost went up 100% and suddenly you magically can use some other means to fill up your cars. You are kind of stuck with oil if you don't change the infrastructure around it that uses it, meaning that you buy an electric car or similar. So society is extraordinarily dependent on oil, and at the same time it's difficult to replace. That makes it such an important material for the whole world. But with that context, let's also talk a little bit of history. It wouldn't be the right thing for this channel if we don't take up history. As you're aware, this is not the first oil shock the world has experienced. We had two of them in the 70s, 73 and 79, where oil went from extraordinarily cheap to expensive. You can see it in the chart here next to me, which is inflation adjusted. And this triggered a lot of action from governments because suddenly oil was in shortage. You had fuel lines and similar. So legislation came into effect in order to increase the fuel efficiency on the car fleet. We developed, or I should say speed up the development and application of nuclear power to take out all oil that was used to generate electricity. This was actually pretty common. Over 10% of electricity in the US was produced by burning oil. And at the same time, we started to develop different and new oil fields. The North Sea oil fields is a good example. It had already been discovered before the oil crisis, but it was not that economic to develop it. But once the oil shocks in the 70s came, it was full forward. So geographically, you didn't want to be as dependent on the Middle East as before. And worth to mention, it's not maybe directly connected, but it was also to build alternatives, like Japan and Europe starting to build out their passenger train system very extensively during the 70s and 80s and into the 90s. And naturally, the International Energy Agency was created to help and prevent a similar shock from occurring, and strategic oil reserves were built up. This was how we replied, or how the shock affected societies in the 70s and into the 80s. So if we take that into consideration, how will this shock play out? Well, I think we can use the same playbook they used in the 70s, which means that countries that are affected, and specifically now it's countries in Asia, they will geographically try to diversify their supply naturally. And if they have any national supplies, they will speed up the development of that. They will probably be ready to pay a higher price to not be as dependent on one region where geopolitical instability can affect their whole energy system. So we will definitely see a scramble for new resources. We will see a lot of money put into developing oil fields, more money maybe than before. And then we will also see a try to replace oil, to use it more effective, just like in the 70s and 80s. And I'd also believe that there will be a lot of building of strategic reserves. Western Europe, China and Japan and the US had built up proper storages, but other countries like, I would say, India, Indonesia, Philippines will probably look at doing the same, to not be this exposed to the global energy market again. And if we go into a little bit more specifically about this, when it comes to replacement technologies, we can already now start seeing that sales of electric vehicles and solar panels are booming, which is not so strange. If oil, the fuel, becomes expensive, naturally you're looking at alternatives. And this is, to be honest, a big difference from the 70s. We have so many new and great technologies like solar and batteries, for example, that can easily replace a diesel generator, which is very commonly used. This has already in some ways happened, for example, in Pakistan. During the 2022 energy crisis, when Russia invaded Ukraine, gas became very expensive on the global market, and I mean then liquefied natural gas. Pakistan was very exposed to this in order for them to generate electricity. After 2022, they took down all the taxes in order to import solar panels. Suddenly, Pakistan became the largest importer of Chinese solar panels for a couple of years, and that included now with batteries. And that made diesel use in Pakistan drop by almost 40%, because Pakistanis had many times, or for a long time, used diesel generator to compensate for the poor grid. Now they used solar panels and batteries combined in order to achieve the same effect. And if we look at the countries that are now affected, many of them are in the global south, where sun is plentiful. And considering now prices and the low investment costs for solar and batteries, this will speed up. And now it will also be a geopolitical decision. Countries do not want to be dependent for these global energy shocks anymore. It is early in this energy shock, but I do think we can draw a couple of conclusions. The one, and I think actually the most important, is that this kind of shocks to the system changes the system. Suddenly radical changes can be implemented very quickly that we thought were impossible. And of the countries that has been hit the hardest, you will see a lot of quite radical policy shifts in order to not be in this situation again. You will also see, or we have already seen, that the electrification has picked up, that the demand for electric vehicles and solar panels and batteries are increasing. They were already growing, but now they are growing quicker. And China has the industrial capacity to supply it. We will also see, or we have seen actually, an uptick in coal use as an alternative fuel to especially gas. We will also see, or what else conclusion can we draw? Well, I do think many nations now are drawn to, so to say, the China model of energy independence and to build big strategic reserves. And I wouldn't be surprised, especially if India is not going to look really heavily into that model and to try to avoid to be this, well, vulnerable for the next time an energy shock happens. Conclusions are important, but sometimes even more funny is what I would call informed speculations. So let's have some informed speculations. My first speculation here is that it's possible that 2025 will be the peak year of oil demand. And so in 2025, the world consumed about 103 to 104 million barrels of oil per day. Now in 2026, it's likely that will go down just because we have a supply shortage. And as we discussed earlier in this video, many nations are now working very, very hard in order to replace the oil demand they're having. And the longer this crisis go on, the more EVs will have left the factory floor, the more solar panels and batteries will get deployed. And that makes it more likely that 2025 might become the year when the world used the most oil in its history. It doesn't mean that oil will fall off a cliff, not at all, but we will plateau and maybe go down a little bit. Another interesting but informed speculation, and that is actually psychology. I don't think we should underestimate the psychological impact that a lot of people are feeling all over the world now, because they cannot fill up their two-wheeler or their car because there is a shortage of fuel. Or in India, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people have had a problem to cook their food because they didn't have any oil products in order to do the cooking. And when any humans have felt that vulnerable or a basic need couldn't be fulfilled, that leaves in some ways a scar. So when you have an alternative product that you can use instead, that step becomes so much shorter. You know, if it's a big psychological step to take to change your Vespa with an internal combustion engine to an electric, if you haven't been able to fill up your Vespa with benzene for a long time, then suddenly that step to change to electric becomes very short. And then maybe we will also see a nuclear renaissance, that in order to electrify society more and quicker, nuclear power might do a comeback. Those are all just informed speculations. Who knows what will happen, to be honest. But I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, please subscribe. And if you learned something, even better. Until next time, bye.